In this video, we are going to talk about molecular dipole moment. What we previously covered in Chapter 1 was the bond dipole, or the difference in polarity across a bond. Molecular dipole moment, however, considers all bond dipoles. Essentially what we're doing is combining all of those bond dipoles and considering both magnitude and direction. This is also referred to as net molecular dipole. We have a few examples shown here. Let's start with this molecule over here on the left. First, we're going to add in the bond dipoles. The carbon-hydrogen bond is a little bit electronegative. We're going to use this small arrow to depict that. Notice that the arrows should be pointed up and towards the carbon, so up into the center. The carbon-chlorine bond is much more electronegative, and that goes up and towards the chlorine. If you combine all of these bond dipoles, what you get is the overall effect where the molecular dipole moment is pointed up and towards the chlorine. Now let's do water. First we have the bond dipoles coming in from the hydrogens and going towards oxygen. And in this case we have lone pairs, and those bond dipoles would be pointing towards the lone pairs. Overall, the effect is up and to the left there. Our last example here is ammonia. The bond dipoles come in towards the nitrogen, up and towards the middle. And we have one bond dipole that goes up from the nitrogen to the lone pair. The overall effect, or molecular dipole moment, is up. Molecular dipole moment is measured in dBs, shown here, and that little mu represents molecular dipole moment. You don't need to know these values, but they give you an overall idea of the intensity of the molecular dipole moment. For example, this molecule on the left has a larger and more intense dipole moment than this molecule over here on the right. Here are some more molecular dipole moment examples. Again, molecular dipole moment is measured in d or dBs. Sodium chloride is an ionic species and so has an extremely large molecular dipole moment. This is the type of number that we would associate with an ionic compound. What's going on with this molecule here? Let's draw this out. If we add in the bond dipoles, we are going in towards the carbon from each of the hydrogens, up towards the oxygen from the carbon, and then out to the lone pairs from the oxygen. The overall effect is up towards the oxygen. Notice that methane, CH4, a tetrahedral compound, does not have a molecular dipole moment. If you're trying to understand why that is, notice that all of the bond dipoles will be pointed in from the hydrogens towards the carbon. The overall effect is that all of those bond dipoles end up canceling each other out, and that's where we get the molecular dipole moment of 0. The same thing happens in CO2. You have a bond dipole towards the right, a bond dipole towards the left, and you can even consider the dipoles going out towards the lone pairs. Each of those bond dipoles has another one that matches it in the equal and opposite direction, so the overall effect is a molecular dipole moment of 0. Here are a few examples of molecular dipole moments using electrostatic potential maps. Over here on the left we can see HF. This is a pretty clear one with a molecular dipole moment pointed towards the fluorine. In the picture here you can see all of the negative charge in red associated with the buildup of negative charge on the fluorine, and the blue representing the buildup of positive charge on the hydrogen. Here's CO2, the one we just did. Notice that the positive charge is in the middle at the carbon. You have negative charge buildup on the left, negative charge buildup on the right. Overall everything cancels out and we end up with a net dipole of 0. And here's water. We also looked at water. Again, you see the negative charge buildup over here where the lone pairs are. The positive charge buildup down here by the hydrogens. Everything points in and up, so we end up with an overall molecular dipole moment pointed up. What you want to be able to do on an exam is to combine the bond dipoles and use those to determine overall molecular dipole moment. You don't need to know anything about values necessarily, except in the cases where the net dipole would be 0. Molecular dipole moments are going to help us predict the reactivity of molecules, because once we've figured out which are the positive and negative ends, we can use that information to determine how they react. We're also going to use what we learned on molecular dipole moments in the next video on intermolecular interactions.